Welcome to the Draft Brewery. Today we're going to be going over Magic Origins set review for Standard Pauper, but first, as with tradition, I want to go over the Dragons of Tarkir top 10 and play a little game called Hit or Miss. Basically just go over if I think I got it right or not. Should this card have been on the list? And sometimes there's not even 10 cards that are good enough from the whole entire set to break into the format, but we'll see. Number 10, Vulturous Haven. I'm going to say hit. There's Mono Black, Exploit decks, and Dimir control decks. Playing this card, it's really sick because the evasion is relevant. It can block a lot of guys, presents a clock, and the card advantage is super real. So I think that Vulturous Haven is actually better than I thought it would be. Number 9, Stampeding Elkherd, another hit. This card basically put mono green on the map. Maybe not necessarily just from this card, but mono green started to win after Dragons of Tarkir came out. So I definitely think this card has a big thing to do with it, because 5/5 is just such a beating. A lot of the blue cards like Nullifier, Griptard are the only things that dealt with it. So much of the other removal in the format, the red removal especially, just couldn't hack it. And the trample is pretty relevant too, so that was good. Twin Bolt, I'm going to go miss on this. With tokens decks being around, I think Scouring Sands is just the type of card you need if you're going to be playing a card that can kill tokens. The added value of potentially being able to kill like a 2 toughness thing is just not worth it. I think people have tried to play this card, but I think it's just been totally not worth it. Just play Magma Spray and Scouring Sands side by side and skip this card. So I think this card's kind of a miss. CDC's Faithful. I definitely think this card's a hit. I've played it probably more than anybody. Just insanely good against Heroic, insanely good against Mono Red and Mono Green. Just blocks all day long and can really put a damper in other people's plans. I like to lead with it. Force the Heroic player to cast a God's Willing, and then in response, cast a removal spell or a Voyage's End or something. Solid defensive card. Conifer Strider. This one's tough. I think I'm going to go miss on this one. I thought it would enable a green-blue Hexproof deck, which I actually played for the first time on my own in one of the very last events of this season, and did pretty well. I made it to the top 4. But this card wasn't key for the deck. There's plenty of other cards that were better. The 1 toughness making it really irrelevant unless you can cast something on it. But even just Aqueous Form on it was really good, so I still think it's a good card, but it's been a miss on all of our followers in the Standard Pauper online metagame from playing it. Nobody's really playing it. Grave Purge, this is a huge miss. Some people are playing it, but it's not the same as back in the Flicker days. It's not a super necessary card. A lot of these games just really aren't going to super late game. And the black font of Return, I think, is a little bit more card advantage, especially now that we have Auramancer back. Anticipate, this is a huge hit. I don't think it's that great as like a 4 of in a lot of decks. The card selection is good, but it's not card advantage. And if you're basically paying 2 mana to 1 for 1 yourself. And sometimes you don't have infinite mana. So it's really hard to keep up sometimes if this is all you're doing is chaining card draw into card selection into, you need things that actually do stuff. But I do like this card. And a lot of people have been playing it, so it's pretty good. Elusive Spellfist. I think this card is a miss, mainly because Blue-White Heroic didn't come together this last season, and It's partially a hit in that it created a whole new deck. It just turns out that that deck wasn't super good, but the Scribe Heroic combo deck, or Scribe, you know, Helix combo deck, with 0 mana artifact, this card, Zephyr Scribe, allows you to basically create, play infinite spells in one turn, Retraction Helix target, Zephyr Scribe, tap to bounce, Silk Spider Net, and then recast it, untap the Scribe, tap it to bounce it, recast it, and just make this guy infinitely power big. So yeah, I think he's a miss overall though. Pacifism is pretty much a miss. Nobody plays it. It's just too easy to deal with. Yeah, I think it would be a good sideboard against some decks, but it's just so bad against Exploit, and green still gets to, Formidable, they still get Ferocious, they still get to leave a creature in play for Devotion, they still get to leave a creature in play for Savage Punch and Epic Confrontation. So it's just really hard card right now. Having Auramancer in the format helps, but without Heliod's Pilgrim, I don't know how much value you're really going to get from it. Especially, and there's a lot of hexproof creatures in the format too. And there's a lot of token makers in the format that, kind of blank this card. So I'm going to say miss so far. And these things might change once the format rotates, once we lose a lot of the cards, but so far, this is the read. And Center Soul is also a miss. Mainly, I thought it would be good because, heroic decks are basically the best, or had been some of the best. But it's just not better than Feat of Resistance. +1/+1 counter matters a lot. And it's definitely not better than God's Willing. The fact that you can cast it twice means the second time it's basically at sorcery speed. And that's not when it's at its value in the +1/+1 counter. It just makes it so many creatures be able to attack or block into other things and end games. So I'm going to say miss, despite being a good card. So after looking through all this, I'm kind of interested to see which cards did I miss out on that are actually really, really good right now. So let's just scan the list right here. I think Student of Ojutai hasn't been played a lot, but I think that card will gain popularity over time. Gurmag Drowner, I think that would have been a hit if I had called it. A lot of people have played that card, and it's quite good, I think. Palace Familiar is also a hit. Jeskai Sage is very good. Some people play Ojutai Summons. I'm still pretty certain that Rise of Eagles is just better. Because once you have 6 mana, you'd almost always rather have Rise of Eagles for the Scry and to get the guys in play at the same turn. I guess it's relevant if you have 7 mana, you want to hold up and negate. Then Ojutai Summon's better if you're playing against Control Mirror, but not that big a deal. I guess, again, Scribe's not necessarily a hit, but it did make an entire new deck, which is pretty cool. Dutiful Attendant, again, pretty narrow, only in the mono black or blue black. Exploitless, but pretty good card. Same thing with Sadist. Pretty good card in those decks. Dragon Fodder, that's a definite hit. Red-white tokens, pretty solid deck here. Impact Tremors would have probably been a hit. It's another pretty good card to come out of tokens. Sabertooth Outrider, I think this card would have been a hit. Basically won a bunch of events in a row with red-green monsters. And Airy Bowmasters makes the mono green deck. It's a pretty good card. Probably would have been a hit. Epic Confrontation, I've played this card a bunch. And it's just very similar to another Savage Punch, so I like that card. That card would have been a hit. It's close. Glade Watcher and Dragon's Guard Bearer are both role players, but I don't think they're crazy good in that mono green deck. And the net saw some play, but that's about it. Alright. So now let's go over the new set, and there's a lot of reprints here, so we don't really need to go over every single one. A lot of these are pretty obvious, but again, I like to use the A as a badass build around card, B is like a solid playable, you'd play it in that color most of the time. C is a borderline playable, just because you're playing that color doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be playing this type of card. It might be more narrow, so it might be aggressively slanted or control slanted. It's like things like Kill Shot I don't think should be in an aggressive deck at all, but in a control deck it could be quite good. And then a D is either borderline unplayable or potentially like a good but narrow sideboard card. So Erase, Cancel Feast of Dreams, Scouring Sands kind of fits this category. Scouring Sands can be a complete blank against some decks, but sometimes very good out of sideboard. And then an F is just, don't talk to me about it. Very bad card. So let's kind of go through these. The Jailer, the activated ability costs too much, so never going to play that. Empyrean Tactician, I think this card's pretty great for tokens. They're going to be able to, get a 3/3 body which can survive a lot of the removal, and then bump their team, just like they would with Warflare or Trumpet Blast. But it's sorcery speed bump, but sometimes they just play the Scouring Sands or Fester Gloom, and then you don't have anything to show for it when you have just draw Trumpet Blast or Warflare with no creatures in play. So at least this guy's a decent top deck post getting wrathed by those creatures or by those other control decks. So I'm a fan of him. I think he's playable. He's definitely playable, a solid B in the tokens deck. Auramancer, for the format right now, there's debilitating injury, I guess. There's no dead weight. There's no Quag Sickness. I guess there is Font of Return. But it's a reprint, so I'm sure it'll be good. Eventually, this might just need some more stuff printed, but there's still Bestow creatures, which we'll be leaving very soon. So it requires the whole deck. It's like a C. It's going to be very good if a Aura deck comes together, but it's kind of unplayable in other decks. So be on the lookout, though. The card's obviously very strong when it's good. Even Battle Priest just costs too much for what you get, so not playing that ever. Celestial Flare, I think this is one of the best cards to be in the set because we just didn't have answers to hexproof creatures for the last million years, it's felt like. It's also very good at stopping heroic creatures who've grown out of range because they can't be protected by God's Willing, Center Soul, Feet of Resistance, etc. So I'm happy to see Celestial Flare. I think it's a very good card because it's kind of easy to play around. Makes other instants, I think, quite good. Makes Raise the Alarm good, and maybe other blue counter spells or something like that pretty good, so that you can get value for when people don't run their creature into Celestial Flare for fear of it dying. Then you hopefully want to cash in some end of turn effects like Anticipate or something along those lines. Charging Griffin, just too small for what it costs. Nobody will play that. Cleric of the Forward Order, ridiculously good card, I think. Mainly because it can gain you 20 life by turn 4. If you just go 2-drop, 3-drop, turn 4, play 2 of these. So that's like the God Hand, obviously not going to happen that much. But that's so sick for the potential that it has. Whether you bounce this guy, replay it, play them, and then again recur them with like the black font. I think the card has quite solid potential. So I'll give that card a B for solid playable. Kind of like Lone Missionary, just enter the battlefield's effects are strong. Enlightened Ascetic. This guy has a strong ability when it's good, but a 1/1 almost does nothing, and it's sorcery speed, so I don't even think people will play this out of the sideboard unless there's like a all aura deck that, you know, that this deck can abuse and recur. But probably not likely to happen. I'll give it a D. Enshrouding Mist. There's not enough renowned creatures to make this really good, and there's too many other cool 1 toughness or 1 mana kind of protection effects like God's Willing. So I don't see this card getting any play right now. It might in the future, but for now, it's pretty bad. I'd give it an F. Grasp of the Hieromancer. I played this one at a PTQ with Topin Freeblade, and it is a really sick combo, actually. I had this red-white aggro deck with no rares, just a bunch of commons that did pretty well. Went 5-2 and got 10th place. Not quite good enough for the top 8 draft, but I really did like this card. But I think it was only mainly because I really liked Topin Freeblade with it. But I think it's solid, but not an effect that is lending itself to this standard pauper format. You're just going to get blown out and get 2-for-1 a lot. So I would not be playing this card. I'm sure people could, but I'd give it an F. Healing Hands, just kind of a waste of mana. Could activate Spell Mastery and stuff, but too slow. I wouldn't waste my breath. Heavy Infantry. Too expensive for the value, right? 3/4 for 5, tapping a guy. There's plenty of other good cards that can get that big for a lot less mana, so I'm never playing that. Knight of the Pilgrim's Road. Too low of toughness for the amount of power that you get, and the payoff of only getting 1+1/+1 counter is not that good, so not a playable. Kythian's Tactics, Trumpet Blast-esque card, can get Vigilance, so kind of like Warflare-esque as well. The problem is that it's sorcery speed. I like these effects to be instant, so that your opponent doesn't know how to block perfectly. It does fit into the tokens deck, so it could be narrow. I'd give it a C, but I don't expect people to play it when there's better options out there. Mighty Leap is kind of a bad combat trick, whatever. Just F. Stalwart Aven, this card is pretty good in limited so far. I expected to see some play, but it's not great. I'd give it like a C+, B-. Suppression Bonds, just a 4-mana pacifism. There's no real relevant non-creature permanents to target, so I just don't. People aren't even playing pacifism, so I can't think of any cool things to do. There's no like nuts equipment or anything, so I give that an F. Topin Freeblade, I think this card is very, 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 very good, especially in limited. For standard proper, it just dies too easily. There's still Lightning Strike and stuff in the format, and Reeve Soul, etc. So it's pretty good to put stuff on them and use Vigilance, but there could be a white weenie deck, white weenie renowned deck or something going on here, that all these white cards get better when you put them all together because they create critical mass, but not the kind of deck that I think is going to be format dominating. Yoktos could be good in defensive blue-white deck, but CDC's Faithful is in the format, so don't play it if you can avoid it. Artificer's Epiphany, pretty good. There's not that many artifacts. I do like Guardians of Melodis right now, but even then, without this, it's a little rough. I'd likely just want to play Divination. You just can't get that much value for holding up mana when it comes to the cost of potentially losing an entire card, so could help you dig for or fuel treasure cruise and whatnot. So it's definitely worth trying, but I'd give it like a C. Spying Aeronaut. The stats are a little low and the mana cost is a little high. I could see someone trying it, but I don't think it's that good or playable, so I'd give it like a C-. Bone to Ash. Too expensive for what it does. Don't expect anybody to play it, and if they do, it's kind of easy to play around. So yeah, I'd give that like a, again, it's kind of like a C minus. Calculated dismissal. I mean, cancels in the format. If cancel said Scry 2 on it with spell mastery, you'd probably play it, but spell mastery is not guaranteed, especially when you're cruising away your graveyard a lot. 3 mana is just a lot for a counter spell. I expect to see some play, but I give it a C. Claustrophobia, we've seen before. It's decent removal, but I don't see many people playing enchantment-based removal unless they're playing mono blue, which is such a narrow deck. I'd rather play just kind of like Griptide and counter spells. So give it an F. I really don't think people will play it. Deep Sea Terror is big for a blue creature, but not likely to attack. Kind of costs a lot. Don't see people playing that. Disperse is not nearly as good as Voyage's End, even though it can target permanents. So don't see people playing that. There's a lot of blanks here. Dreadwaters could enable some sort of mill deck, probably not. Some sort of ramp deck that can mill people out like Turbo Fog, but it just doesn't hit hard enough. Doesn't mill hard enough, so no. Fairy Miscreant, no way to get too much value off this, so if the first one drew a card, yeah, I'd be all about it. But yeah, it takes too much work. Maritime Guard, no. Negate's already in the format, and it's pretty good. It fluctuates from being like a main deck playable to a good sideboard card, so it fluctuates kind of between like, B minus, C kind of range. Depends. Nivix Barrier, even in defensive deck, seems like a waste of a card. Costs too much. Ringwarden Owl, it just dies right away the turn you cast it a lot of the times in the prowess. You'd rather have on like a 2 mana creature that can get real big, not like a normal stats creature. So don't think that's playable. Scrapskin Drake. The zombie's not relevant right now. It's a pretty decently statsed card, but it can't block ground guys. Is the biggest problem, so I don't see people playing that. Screeching Scab could enable some delve and other graveyard synergy type cards, but 2-1-for-2 is a little underpowered. So give that a F. Send to Sleep is actually pretty good. 2 mana lock your opponent's team down is super solid. The fact is, it's not always going to be that way. And you kind of want this in an aggressive or tempo-y type deck where you're trying to outrace them. So it's not that best in a control deck, but the control deck's where all the spells are. So I'm kind of unsure about this card. I think it could be good, but we've seen this effect before, and it's not that great of an effect. So I'm gonna don't expect people to play it. I'll give it like a D minus. Separatist Void Mage. This card's super solid. If it was 3 mana, it would be real good, like the original Manowar or Aether Adept. Even at 4, I think I'll see some play. You can bounce your own Grey Merchants, bounce opponents' tokens. You can do a lot of interesting things with it. Makes pacifism worse again. So, Enter the Battlefield effects are just always strong. So I expect it to be good, solid playable, just like B. Stratus Walk, it's already in the format. It's a pretty good card, but nobody plays it, so not a big deal. Water Courser is pretty great and limited. Can always trade up, but I think it's too easy to deal with and too mana intensive for this format. So F. Catacomb Slug, no. F. Dark Dabbling. Too slow, even though it cycles. Could be really brutal. when you spell mastery this, it's kind of like if all your creatures happen to be attacking or blocking, and they all would be trading, but then they don't because you save them all. It's pretty nuts, but that's just not likely to happen. Deadbridge Shaman. I think it's solid, but it trades with too much, and the Magma Spray effects in the format right now get it, so I'm not looking to play this type of card, but I can see other people trying to. I just want to enter the battlefield effects a lot more. Like Eyeblight Assassin. Eyeblight Assassin's playable. If you're trying to kill X1s, there's better cards to do it though, so sometimes he's just going to be a 3-mana 2/2 and not really have any targets, so it's like a pretty borderline playable. Fetid Imp. This is the first creature. There's tons of Death Touch Rats in black. The first one that has flying, but it costs that mana to give it the Death Touch, so huge flyers aren't really the big problem. But it does have 2 toughness, which is nice. So I see this having potential playability, but not that likely. So I'll give it like a C. Infernal Scarring. Not the type of card I expect to see. It could be good in like white-black heroic, but you don't want your guy to die. You'd rather just protect it. But the 2 powers, kind of like Inferno Fist. This card's not as good as Inferno Fist, and I think Inferno Fist was only played as 1 or 2 of it in a bunch deck, so not that great. Macabre Waltz. Decent card advantage, but with the black font and Auramancer in the format, don't think it'll get played. And Tuco Husk, there's some sick combos you can run with this. A lot of Act of Treason type effects, or just tokens and stuff. And you can blank, other people's removal that has scry effects on it. So there's a lot of value that he can gain. Like, definitely expect him to see some play. It's kind of narrow in the type of decks that he can be in, so he's kind of like a C, C+. But interested to see the possibilities with him. Night Stare, a little too slow when there's duress in the format, so no. Bloodsucker, too easy to kill for that much mana. Read the Bones, it's already in the format, and it's fantastic. It's a B, it's a playable, solid in black. Reeve Soul, super solid. This card is the best 2 mana based removal that we've seen in black for a long time, even though it's only sorcery speed. It can trade up almost all the time, and I'm happy to try this card out. It's just strictly better defeat, so looking forward to actually killing creatures with a 2 mana card for once. I still don't like that 2 mana removal is conditional, and both in timing and in who it can kill based on power or toughness, It'd be cooler to see, more of the smother to destroy based on converted mana cost rather than power, since people can modify their power really easily in this format, but they can't change the converted mana cost, So I'd like to see like a smother card, or a card that maybe it costs 2 mana, but it's like Disdainful Strike. You destroy target creature that costs 4 or more. I think that would be a really cool card. You heard it here first in case it gets spoiled. 2 mana instead of Smother. We need to come up with a name of it. Maybe like Suffocate. Maybe it's probably already a card printed. I haven't played in all the sets, but Smother, destroy, converted mana cost 3 or less. Suffocate, destroy, converted mana cost 4 or more. Something like that. Alright, Return Centaur. Seems playable in a self-mill deck, but that deck probably doesn't even need it, so I'm going to pass. Shambling Ghoul, there's no real zombie synergies. Come and play tap's annoying. 2 and 2/3 is like a decent rate, but I don't see people playing it, so it's probably like a C- or D. Thornbow Archer, no. Touch a Moon Glove, no. These cards are just bad. Undead Servant, this card's fun. The first one's no value, but all the other ones give you create 1, 2, or 3 extra 2/2s. which in this format is pretty insane. There's so many fun ways to like bounce this, replay it, or, you know, return it from the graveyard and replay it, or self-mill a bunch of them and then cast the first one and get your value right away. Requires a lot of work for him to do well, but I think he's potentially worth it because he's not going to be your only win con in a deck like that. It's going to be surrounded with good supporting cast. Unholy Hunger, the new 5-mana Doomblade. 5-mana Doomblades basically have been shown to be unplayable. Too slow in this format. Ready on the roll, also too slow. Even with Oromancer, like, there's debilitating injury at 2 mana. That's what would happen. Act of Treason already in the format. Solid with an Nantuko Husk and maybe a sideboard mono red against green decks, but pretty bad sideboard card, I think. It sometimes would be good, but give it a D. Corn Sergeant, I think he's solid, but a little slow. And I don't see my fast red decks wanting to play it, so F. Bell's Lizard, F. Already in the format, pretty weak. Bogart Brute, easy to kill, but good ability. A little slow, though. I'd rather play Krenko's Enforcer or Goblin Heel Cutter or something like that. So, some people could play it. Give it a D. Chandra's Fury. This card's great, but Scouring Sands already exists, and I don't think the 4 damage is relevant, so I'll pass on that. Culbrute, pass. Demolish, pass. Dragon Fodder already in the format, pretty good. Fiery Impulse, this card's great. Shock or Lightning Bolt can only target creatures, but for the control decks, not necessarily mono red decks, this card seems fantastic because being able to not being able to kill 3 toughness creatures was a real problem with Shock. So in the late game, you can like start trading up even more mana, which I think is great. So definitely looking forward to playing that card. Firefiend Elemental, costs too much, too easy to kill. Gearcrafter, just like, you know, the next coming of Sam Cass, whatever the guy that's Sandcast Outrider or something that made a 2/1 and a 1/1. Token makers are great, especially for the Boros deck. Infectious Bloodlust, this card's interesting. I could see it in a white-red like aggro deck, maybe with a little Oromancer shell. But in general, I'm just trying not to get 2-for-1 that much with this card in response to it being cast. But it does enable Heroic and could be playable in like a mono red deck or a Boros aggro deck. So I don't think it's that good, but I'd give it a shot if you want. Maybe like a C+. Lightning Javelin, too slow for what it costs. So that's F. Majoring Bully, very good, I think. Prowess on a 2 converted mana cost guy is great. And he's already got 2 power to start. The fact that he has to attack is great. Sure, he'll chump attack sometimes, but you already want to be attacking him a lot of the times. And so you just play your removal spell or play your pump spell targeting your other creatures, and now their 2/2, you know, that blocked it dies, and he just keeps crunching every turn. So got a chance to play against this card in the Extended Pauper League mono red deck a lot when I was testing with our Medio, and this card crushed me over and over and over and over again. So I had to kind of change my thoughts on how to deal with a card like that. Basically need dead weight or quick 2 toughness removal like immediately. Alright, Prickabore, costs too much for what you get, too easy to kill. Not enough artifacts for Smash the Smithereens. Subterranean Scout, too small of an effect. Seems pretty cool with Nantuko Husk actually. Has like a little coup de grace. And maybe like a red, black tokens Act of Treason deck. I could actually see that being a fun way to kill someone. But if they have removal, it might not be the best, but red just needs more token makers other than just dragon fodder to help support that deck, so it could go in Mardu tokens. But other than that potential combo with Nintuko has got it. I don't really see this card being playable at all, so I'll give it a D. Titan Strength already in the format, pretty great card in red aggro and heroic decks. Give it a B. Volcanic Rambler, much too slow. Aerial Volley seems great. Arc Lightning for flyers only. Has to be a lot of Thopters or small flyers for this to be relevant, which I don't think it will be, so I think it's kind of like a D. It's like potential sideboard, but probably won't be that good. Caterpillar, not even that great of a sideboard card. Give it an F. Visionaries card's very playable. I don't think it's exactly what the mono green or green aggressive decks want right now. But if there was, some sort of deck that could abuse a lot of inter-battlefield effects, he would go in it. So it's playable. It's a B minus though, because I don't know what it would go in right now. Hitchclaw Recluse, little giant spider's baby cousin. Not what green wants to be doing. I would not play it. Leaf Gilder, just pretty good card. Golden Hind was in the format though, and not seeing play at all, so don't see that getting play. Empath, good little card advantage engine, but again, green needs to beat down and have bigger stats, so don't see it getting played that often. But I think it is a playable card. I would consider it like a C+. Mental Webs, no. Might of the Masses, green-white token deck, something like that. Still don't see it as that great of a trick. But it could be a lot of damage out of nowhere, so it's probably like a D. This Pilgrimage doesn't really fix you, just a couple lands. It's a D. There's some value that you can gain from it, but I don't like it. Orchard Spirit, little small for pseudo evasion. Don't see people playing it. A big Death Touch creature seems pretty good. This card seems playable, but it seems a little slow for what you get. But I do like the abilities here, so I give it like a C. Claim, no. Rock Maulers, pretty big, pretty good. I don't think it's good as Stampeding Elkherd or Nessian Asp. But, yeah, I don't think people will play it. Timberpack Wolf, again, seems decent, but you have to play 4 in your deck, and they're all just kind of mediocre unless you draw them all together. So, not looking to play it. Titanic Growth, already in the format. Playable in some green decks. I don't think it's a good card. I don't like pump spells. Other than maybe Aspect Hydra, since it can deal so much damage, and it only costs 1. So, don't like Titanic Growth much. Vastwood Gorger, don't really need. Green decks don't really need a card like this, so skip it. Vine Snare, nah, would not play it. Wild Instincts, no, it just costs too much. For the Savage Surge, Yavis Force Mage, pretty good in green aggressive deck. I would definitely see this card as playable. Kind of like a B minus. It's not that great, but can help push some damage through. Could be some green-white Renown deck or something like that too. Alchemist Vial is actually a pretty cool card to use with that blue Artificer's Epiphany, so that you have an artifact in play. So you don't have to discard, but still I don't think it's that powerful of an effect. It's not fixing your mana or anything, so I do not see people playing it, but I give it a D. Some people might play it. Bonded Construct seems very good. In the red aggressive deck with haste creatures, it's great. Even in a defensive deck against like mono red, this card could be playable just because it can trade or against mono green. If like a control deck or something, and they're playing, a 3/2 for 2 mana, or a 4/2 for 3 mana, this card seems like a really great wall. Cheap and doesn't matter. You can't get color screwed, so I see him being pretty playable in a variety of roles. So I think he's a solid B. Guardian Automaton. This card actually seems pretty good, but it's a little costly for what you get. So I don't think people will play it. F. Guardian's already in the format. I was the first one to start playing this card regularly, I think, in the mono blue control deck as a sideboard card to block 5 toughness guys. And it's quite good when it's good at that. But yeah, they attack into it all the time, and it does cost 3 mana, so can block Krenko's Enforcer is another good benefit. But I'd give it's like a C. It's like pretty bad most of the time, but sometimes really just what you needed. Veteran Simar, just not enough in effect. It should give you +1, +2, I think, for this much power or mana cost. And Evolving Wilds is already in the format too, which is obviously an all-star. And so if I have to rank the top 10, this is my ranking. I give a little explanation here, which I've kind of already talked about. But honorable mention, Separatist Void Mage, number 10. Then Tuco Husk, number 9. Undead Servant. Number 8, Empyrean Tactician. Number 7, Bonded Construct. Number 6, Cleric of the Forward Order. Number 5, Gearcrafter. Number 4, Majoring Bully. Number 3, Fire Impulse. Number 2, Celestial Flare. And number 1, Reeve Soul. And so these are the cards, not necessarily I think that would be the most popular, the most played, but I think these cards, their presence in the format, warps the format the most, meaning now that we know that these removal spells are in the format, you're going to want ways to compete with them. So you're going to want excess creatures to attack with when you have Celestial Flare. You're going to want to make your creature for power at some point, if possible, because it's sorcery speed. If you can, if you don't, they have efficient way to kill your guy. So yeah, so I think those are the main cards to look out for. And then in terms of the color order, I think it goes green, blue, white, red, black for standard proper, which is not necessarily the same at all for like limited and sealed and draft and stuff like that. But right now I'd be on the lookout for efficient control decks and token decks and just decks that are looking to try new things, try like some of these cards. This Undead Servant, it's actually a build around card. I don't think it's a busted card, but it is like a badass build around. And Tuco Husk is pretty much build around. Void Mages could be just an aggressive tempo card, or it could be built around bouncing your own Gray Merchants. Tactician, you're kind of building around it, putting a bunch of tokens surrounding it. Bonded Construct, you're usually either being aggressive or using it as a narrow sideboard defensive card. Cleric, again, very powerful sideboard card, I think, for the most part. Gearcrafter, building around the tokens. Majoring Bully, just huge threat for mono red. Just beats down really, really heavily. Pretty good in red-green, too. The red-green aggressive deck could play this card because they have, Fall the Hammer, Savage Punch, Epic Confrontation. So this card just kind of gets the beats going early. I like that in their deck. Impulse, just great control card. Flare and Reef Soul too. So yeah, So this set, I think, it will be pretty fun and add a decent mix of cards to the format. And the real test will be once the format rotates and these cards will be standing alone without all of Theros block there. So, yep. So those are my predictions for the next set review. I'll go through hit or miss again, and we'll see. I'm definitely looking forward to trying to build some decks. First deck that I'm working on right now is trying to update Zephyr Scribe combo. Dimir, Splash Black, mainly for duress, but then to have a transformational sideboard to play a lot of creatures, and I think Reave Soul is just a good card to have for that. So let's see if this pops up right now. Yeah, so this is the deck that I have been working on. Basically it's the same deck that I played a long time ago in the main deck, but I like the thought of getting people to sideboard against the combo game 1, and then game 2 you still have a lot of self-mill, so Angler's good, and this Undead Servant could potentially be good, and then you can bounce your Undead Servant after playing it to try to get 3 more 2/2s for free. And then against other aggressive decks, I think Reave Soul is just like a good card to interact with them. Just to kind of try to slow them down at the beginning, but you have some bounce spells too, like you could Retraction Helix their guy, like a big heroic creature, and then as they replay it, like a Wingsteed Rider, if they replay it, then you can hopefully Reave Soul it. Sorcery speed might prove to be a real big drawback here, but I still think it's efficient enough and hits enough creatures in the format that you want broad answers and efficient answers. So yeah. Well, I think that's about it for the set review. If there's any cards you seriously disagree with, let me know. And I maybe, forgot some, but it is actually tough to pick top 10. I made this list up, a couple weeks ago and just hadn't been getting around to doing this little video. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you at SPDC or MPDC for events. It's free to enter tournaments, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Really fun tournaments where you can practice your brewing and standard popperness, and pretty enjoyable community. Cool. Alright, well, thanks for listening, and see you next time.